great thing is they're recording in 4K.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's fucking mental. It is so crazy.
Which gen is this one? The latest?
Yeah, 3. Yeah, Osmo Pocket 3.
Right.
Yeah,
Nice.
I can obviously you can see I love my cameras,
Yeah.
my technology.
I like how
That's
it's like
good.
selfie mode, you know? So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can
you can
actually
see-
monitor rather than
What's
the
Exactly.
GoPros.
What's the low light like on these?
They've actually got a low light mode as well.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Shit.
So I'll never have the problem like with the GoPros. I didn't realize it wasn't on.
Yeah.
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 and then the creator pack comes with a microphone, and the microphone has I can't remember what the technology is, but it's the same technology that's used in these.
Pretty good
where
audio.
where it's noise reduction. Yeah. But yeah, so I was pretty surprised at the quality of the image, video wise. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Looks good.
But Aaron, Josh,
Oh, we started. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. We started before.
we
Okay.
just got
when I
so,
hit record.
so into the camera talk.
Yeah, so into the camera talk. I mean, as I mentioned, I was a photographer for 11 years, and then last year I decided that I wanted to do something different, and I started interviewing models like after photo shoots. I actually started with one of those, the Osmo Pocket, and I really enjoyed the interviewing. I just didn't like the editing because you don't like the sound of your own voice. But I just like push through it, and then I worked out that I actually love talking to people. So I had all the camera gear, and then I had all the lighting. I just needed to set up the space and get the audio equipment, and now this is episode 71
Wow.
That's
since
awesome.
December.
Oh, congrats. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah. And I think they say like 99% of podcasts stop after episode 21. So if you can get to 22, then you're going to be in the top 1%.
Or you've broken through that ceiling.
That was like our lockdown podcast. They only went for what, 12? And then we gave it
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
You could tell it wasn't a longevity thing.
Yeah. You kind of, I don't know, like with me, I'm such a 100% or nothing. And it's weird because I think gradually over time that's gotten worse and worse and worse, in that like I'll get right into something and then just throw everything out the window and just like be in that, and then it like, yeah, unless I try to apply some sort of balance in my life to like weigh things out, then things can go a little bit haywire.
I think once you commit, you're pretty much in it, and you just dig deep.
Yeah, I dig deep. I mean, take for example, I think it was like 2 years ago. I bought myself a drone.
I know that game.
2 days later, I was like kicking myself because the guy that sold me it at the shop didn't tell me that I bought a drone submarine.
A what?
Yeah.
A drone submarine.
A drone submarine, because it was flying and then all of a sudden it went into the water and I lost it.
Wow.
What?
Yeah. It just like, I don't know what happened.
Wait, is that its function? It goes in.
No, it's not its
Oh,
function.
okay.
It's
a joke.
It's a joke.
Oh.
It's a joke. But yeah, and then I got a replacement, and then I was like, yeah, and then I bought another one, and then I bought another one. So I got 4,
Nice.
and I just bought another one yesterday.
I feel like what happened to your first drone was a similar path that happened to, because basically Josh and I, we started working together back in 2017 with this old band, And so obviously being faced with the whole independent creator thing, we had to do it ourselves. So I went from just being director on it to also being cameraman. And Josh was like, yeah, I think there's a shot where we need a drone. So I got a drone and the shoot went fine, but I proceeded to fly that drone on 10 occasions after, crashing it about 3 to 4 times.
A flight.
In flight, yep. Before it finally collided with the wall of a cave, and I was like, that's it. It's gone. It's gone. Game over. And I was like, it's not for me. So that's why we do comics now. There's nothing I can destroy when it comes to that.
I mean, at least you gave it a go.
It's a very expensive go.
Yeah. He managed to crash it into a tree while on top of a mountain. So it's not his forte, no.
There could be worse things that he could have spent his money on.
I probably did spend my money on worse things, and then the drone.
I mean, do you play golf?
No, so I'm lucky there.
That's an expensive
Yeah.
hobby.
Yeah.
Are you into water sports?
No, and
That is also an expensive hobby.
oh, okay, yeah. For the longest time, I thought water sports was a sexual term. So when you asked me that, I was like,
Also expensive hobby.
Shit!
not if you go to where I go.
episode ever.
I mean, look, whatever. All right, just talk about everything and anything on here.
Well, I mean, that's like, when it comes to the stuff that we write, I think when you write something for a story, you have to be very focused. But what's fun is the way we promote things with our reels and everything is that it's nothing's off the table. I mean, to a degree.
And so how did this comic come about?
We've always been very cryptic in all of our interviews, but for some reason, I really like the way, you phrase the questions and where you take it. So I think today I'm going to be a lot more candid than I usually am,
The exclusive.
while also not confirming or denying anything.
It's just the power of me. This is how I do it, and no one else does it like me.
That's a good host. You know how to dig and scoop out the meat.
This is a very personal story to me. What I won't specify is how I know this story, but it's a very personal story, and it's a story I felt I needed to tell. Which throw back to a different episode where it's something I feel I need to do, not that just I want to do.
Okay. So what's the story?
Well, the story of Gods Among Men, I don't know which one to this one, is a story of a small business owner who runs a restaurant who is trying to make ends meet. And he tries doing everything by the book, and he keeps hitting a wall, and he's kind of in a pretty dire, desperate situation. He's running out of ideas, and then the opportunity presents itself to him to make money in more illicit ways. And this is just the beginning, but it's a story that Josh and I have been working on for over a decade. That we know exactly how it ends, and we know how it builds. So issue 1 here actually teases some of the things to come.
I think it's quite an interesting concept, because I kind of can tell just by that little synopsis that it's almost like the challenge of life. When you get presented with hardships, do you take the easy route or do you take the difficult route? And the easy route is doing things that you shouldn't be doing versus putting in the hard yards and the hard work,
I think what's and I feel like you can probably speak more on this, but what's interesting is that as time goes, the the illicit route is not necessarily the easier route, but it's more of a path B rather than the easier. I don't know. It's how would you phrase it?
I think people confuse legislation with morality. I think there's obvious things, but there's also things that appear obvious, but there's degrees to it. I think a very basic one is you shouldn't kill another person. But there's layers to that, isn't there? You have to ask, like, in what circumstance?
Are they already dying?
Right.
Is their quality of life not so great? So are we doing them a favor?
Yeah, that's
Are they a dickhead?
Do they keep smashing drones into caves?
There we go. I mean, there's a book called A Time to Kill, and in A Time to Kill,
Double Jeopardy, yeah.
yeah, they talk about there's a season for every action. So it's not that things are seldom that clear cut. We're very used to viewing the world and many things in black and white. Whereas in this book, we're trying to say the world's actually different shades of gray.
The world is different shades of grey. I think as a creative, there's more grey than black and white. And once you can tap into that and acknowledge that, the world just becomes so much a better place to be.
Oh, yeah.
Like when I was younger, so I've got an electrical engineering background.
Right.
And when I was younger, I was like very analytical. Everything's like evidence-based and black and white and yada, 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 like all this type of stuff. And I used to really get annoyed when people didn't appreciate that. But as I've gotten older, what's interesting is my understanding of humans and human behavior has expanded, and the benefits of having that knowledge has enabled me to expand out this grey area and this grey understanding in order to tap into this creative side of, what I'm about.
I think that was that was something for us that in the beginning process, because I would say between the two of us, of the more comic book inclination, I got really deep into it over a quick period of time. And when we first decided that, having this story first, we wanted to make it, develop into film, and the story was attempted to be told through music. But when we first decided to make it into a comic book, I was like, all right, we'll sit down and try and work it out. And there were things that Josh would suggest, and I'd go, you can't, like, that's a bit weird for a comic book, or it doesn't fly. And he's like, I don't care, it's what I want to do. So between the two of us, he is the original ideas guy, and I'm the script writer adapter. But there were things like I actually I fought him on the cover when we first saw it. I said, it doesn't look like a comic book cover. And Josh is like, I don't care. I was going for an album art kind of look. And in the end, I came around and I went, you know what? I actually love it. And the great thing is it stands out on a comic shelf amongst other books because it doesn't look like a typical comic cover.
Do you find you get much readership?
I would say so. What's interesting more than just the numbers is the quality. You want to talk a little bit about your impression?
I was really surprised by the reception to this comic because, for a long time, I've been trying to tell this story through my previous band. And we tried to expand with videos. Like Aaron said, we wanted to make it into a movie at first, and then it was like maybe a TV series. But financially, that's impossible, especially with our locations and subject matter. So when we finally came to a comic, it was actually a bit of a compromise for me. This was not my vision, how I wanted to tell this story, but this is the only option available to us. So I said, look, if I'm making that compromise, then I'm not going to compromise on how I want to do it. And that's where a lot of the I don't care came from. So I didn't expect it to resonate with anyone. It resonated with me, but there's something as a creative, you have to realize just because something means something to you doesn't mean the rest of the world's gonna feel the same way. So I thought, you know what? I don't care what everyone thinks. I'm just gonna do it for me. And when it came out, we were just stunned that that many people received it so well.
I think it's so good though, like that whole approach of not really caring about the impact that it's going to have because you're really just doing it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's that level of authenticity, you know, and whilst your readers may not know your backstory, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you created something and you threw it out there into the universe, and the universe is paying you back.
It's just one of those things. I think they're things that you'd like to happen, but you don't know. Like I remember there was a very genuine, joyful moment leading up to, because this was our first entry into, you know, like officially into the comic book world, into the local scene, whatnot. And so we did a Kickstarter campaign for it, and we thought, all right, we'll set a pretty modest budget of like $1,500. And you know, leading up to it, you do everything you can to promote it, but there was still these nerves because you're like, I don't know. We've got no reference point to go off by, you know. We did, you know, I was doing film stuff for about 5, 6 years. Haven't seen a cent out of that. So now when it came to, we've got an opportunity to actually make money from this thing we've created, you get nervous. And then next thing you know, we did a live for it, and we got fully funded within the first hour. And I was just like, I was ready to take my shirt off and start partying. And like, there was just such genuine joy in the room. And it was a really good first step.
Finish on like over 200%.
It finished on 270% at $4,070 raised. And that for us, I think that was something that, you know, in the comic world, you've got varying levels of what people can achieve with things like comic Kickstarters. But we came in April this year, just guns a-blazing, and people started going, who the hell are the Mac Bros? You know, they came out of nowhere. They start promoting like crazy. And then next thing you know, it's like, boom, the comic is, I think now we're in 26 stores nationwide, and yeah, across all the states.
Fuck.
We started doing that after the Kickstarter ended.
Including Readings Bookstore in 4 of their locations?
So 3.
3? Oh,
so
okay.
we're in Carlton Flagship Store, Emporium, and St. Kilda Readings Bookstore. That was another, like at every step, it was like, how can we push it? How can we push it? And I guess can we tease the latest release? We have recently secured a store in KL, Malaysia.
Wow.
It's just the beginning.
Like my skin's kind of like tingling right now because I just can't believe the level of like guests that I can get on this podcast and like the stories that you tell. Like, so take me through, like, how did that kind of come about? Like how, like so you did the Kickstarter and then what did you do?
Well, Kickstarter is it's real special because it's like an event, and you get a chance to, you know, a lot of people just get involved with this event. You make things exclusive to the Kickstarter. You know, we had hardcover versions that we would have handwritten notes. We had a special foil version which looked amazing because all the white turned to silver, and that was really good. And once the Kickstarter ended, you come off this high, right? And that's where I think a lot of people get stuck. Like, where do you go from here? And often the initial reaction is, okay, let's go to the next issue and we'll do another Kickstarter. Whereas I looked at it from, you know, like a business perspective. You don't, when you have this high, you need to continue to grow it and create an even bigger impact before we even talk about creating more stuff. You know, it happens with bands all the time as well, where they're just releasing single after single and then an album every year. when the first album you released hasn't really reached its maximum potential. You know, we're always playing shows in Melbourne, and there is a thing people talk about. If you play too often, it's detrimental to a band, because why come see you this week if you're just going to be down the road next week?
Yeah.
But all you have to do is go to another city, now with a band, that's difficult, right? Going to another state, is a lot of cost involved. Whereas with a comic, there's pretty much no limitations. We can send it anywhere in the world, which Kickstarter already proved.
With slightly less limitation,
Yeah.
but I think that was one thing where we would compare sort of notes with how the comic could proceed versus how the band could proceed. And I think music can go further, but the comic could get us to a good spot quicker. So kind of working these two fronts in tandem has been a really beneficial sort of strategy.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of like logistical challenges with a band, not so much logistical challenges with a comic, like sending the comic in the mail or whatever. But from a creative point of view and a printing point of view and a version and, you know, updates and all that type of stuff, like all of that stuff would be hard to compile
I mean,
and organize, you know?
It comes with the territory of when you have to print anything, then you got to factor these costs in. But it was one thing that we started noticing when we first began was I think our benefit was the fact that we weren't really in the comic creating scene prior. And I think a lot of people in the local scene get stuck in the mindset of there's certain like unspoken rules, right? Like they're always, you know, they say
the rules.
Well, in a way you have to, because these, you know, there's a lot of these unspoken rules that work to your disadvantage when they go, oh, you know, you got to price your comic to almost price match what the US, you know, like Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, like they're trying to price match them. And I'm like, you're a small scale business. How can you afford to print more pages than them and try and match them? And the other thing was the phrase we kept hearing after our Kickstarter was people going like, capitalize on the momentum. The thing is, one thing Josh pointed out to me, and this is the business mind, you know, I was like, yeah, like maybe that might be good. And Josh was like, what momentum? Only the people who have pledged to the Kickstarter have seen this comic. But even like before today, like now you know about it. But there was not really such a big momentum that people were saying that there was. We thought, how do you get real momentum? And, you know, one of those ways was, all right, well, let's get physical copies into stores so that when people go to comic shops, actually we've got bookstores and record shops as well, that they can see it physically and go like, what's this? You know?
I think it's so cool. Like being able to diversify it's almost the new frontier. It's a new frontier to ensure you have continuity and stability. If you're not diversifying as a creative, you're limiting yourself to your entire, like every possibility. You know, when I started this podcast and I was still doing photography, and I'm going back to doing photography. People, like I was getting photographers on and I was getting models on. And what I found was one of the reasons why I wanted them on was because I wanted to shine the limelight on them and bring to life their character, which could be seen in their style of photography or style of photos. And the feedback that I was getting was amazing. Like people were like, oh my God, I had no idea that person does this or does that and all this type of stuff, right? And so it can add so much more depth to what you're about, and you know, then it just builds that trust with your audience or with your, you know, your fan base.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so it's gonna be in KL.
It's so
sent it off this morning.
Yeah.
Sent it off this morning.
In transit. So hopefully in the next week or so, we actually plan to that's another unconventional strategy that we've taken that's kind of made people, in order for people to go, who the hell are the Mac Bros? We had to really get ourselves out there.
Yeah.
And that was something that, trying to work the social media angle, I got this piece of advice from Anna where she said, you should make more reels.
Let's go.
It was the let's go attitude, and because at first it was just like, all right, yeah, we'll post photos of, oh, here's the art process. Very typical. A lot of comics will just post like, all right, here, work in progress posts, And Anna was like, why don't you do more reels? And I thought about it, and there was a period of time in 2021 where I was obsessed with TikTok because obviously like we're locked down and everything, and I was bored, so I started making skits on TikTok.
I read a story today, actually. They did a study on how fast it is for you to get addicted to TikTok.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, that's longer than the average attention span of people on TikTok. So that was one thing for me that I was like, I was just bored and made stuff on there. The thing was, I ended up falling out of it because of two reasons. One was that it's a platform that rewards quantity, not quality. And I was trying to make skits that I was putting a lot of thought into. And so if I wasn't generating them quick enough, people were like, meh, and then they drop off. But the other thing that Josh pointed out to me that I said, that's a good point, was he said, you're kind of making these skits, but at the end of the day, like to what end? Because you get a lot of this attention, but then if you can't divert it into something sort of that can return, then sort of what's the point?
Yeah.
But I took those skills.
That's a lot of social media, though.
It is.
Like, how are you getting your return on investment?
Well, that's the thing. I think, that was one thing that I had to sort of sit back and reevaluate. That's like, am I just doing this for that ego attention thing? Or if I'm not putting
that's
into
also
something?
true of music, though. I think a lot of the problems are artists focus their time and their money on the wrong thing. You see, to me, your social media is no different from your album and your music video. Both of all these things are essentially very expensive commercials because nobody, even the biggest names, are really making real money off their streaming anymore or, video views. So essentially all they are is expensive commercials, but how do you then monetize it? When it comes to music, it has to come from your live shows, from your merchandise or other avenues. And same with TikTok. If you get all these followers, all these views, but if you can't direct them to something that, in this case, we use these reels to direct them to the website, to the comics, to the shops. You have to find some way to make sense of these things, but not lose sight that end of the day, they are just commercials.
I think the advantage, though, is that with the rise of technology and social media, it does give the power in the creative's hands to then take control over, like, promoting and, like, direction of, where the fan base can be, kind of directed towards, because there isn't the need now to have, like, a massive agency to, like, pay with a budget or, like stuff like that. Like you can do stuff so independently.
I do think that's a double-edged sword though. See, with music, traditionally labels were always referred to as, the gatekeepers. And that's like a dirty word, but I don't think gatekeepers is a dirty word. I think gatekeepers, well, if you look at who gatekeepers were originally, and if they did their job right, they were good for the castle.
What? That's the key element, though. If they did their job right, more than often they were probably bribed.
Right. See, bribery is such a interesting topic too, because I think some bribery can make some things work better, but in one way or another, like, people who pay for promotions and this and that, that's bribery in itself.
You talk like a true Singaporean.
Yeah. One of those that isn't allowed back.
Because he's too honest.
Because he's too honest.
You see, with I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about bribery and
okay, gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers.
Yeah. So with the band Anna, within the first few months, we got signed to Eclipse Records. And this is amidst the train of, everybody going like, yeah, power to the artist, the individual and independent, blah blah blah. I have this one of my personal philosophies is if everybody's doing something, it's probably wrong,
Oh,
and I'll justify it.
please,
I'm not
please
saying
do.
I'm not saying it's definitely wrong.
If everybody's doing something, it must be wrong.
No, it's
Probably
probably
wrong.
Oh, it's probably
It's,
wrong.
it's not must be. I make very few absolute statements. They always come with a caveat.
Okay.
The reason is that what we want as creatives, very few have,
Mm.
right? So if you want what very few have, you can't do what the majority do.
Mm.
And that's why I'm against things like trends and all that, because by the time something becomes a trend, it's too late.
Mm.
You know, like don't talk about Apple stock now. Apple stock was worth talking about when nobody realized it was worth talking about.
Mm.
You know, you see the same thing with crypto and things like that. You know, like Bitcoin's gone up. I said, dude, it's never gonna go up the way it did back in like 2000.
Mm.
You've missed the boat.
Mm.
And
Or NFTs.
Or NFT.
I don't know. I
Did you,
think
did you get into NFTs?
No.
No.
I heard it coming out at that time, and it's funny how there was a Todd McFarlane of Image Comics. He, played a role in kind of being very onto it for a period of time, him and Steve Aoki. And somebody said to me, they're like, but it's sort of like booming and coming up. And I'm like, so why is it they were talking so much about it then, and
he's
then
just
suddenly
dropped it now.
just kind of dropped it? Yeah.
But back to gatekeepers. I mean, okay, yes. Let's first we address the issue. The record label industry, and this is true of any other entertainment stuff, whether it's film studios or comic studios and all that, they have a lot to apologize for.
Mm.
I think they absolutely dropped the ball when it came to the digitization of art.
Oh, yeah.
They really screwed up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they have to answer for that. But at the same time, I'm not absolving the consumer of it, myself included, for kind of being responsible for that. I still hold them more responsible because they have the power. So they should have known better.
Mm.
But we have this knee-jerk reaction sometimes as a society or community where something goes wrong and we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, and I think part of that also was the lack of understanding on how successful and how fast technology was going to
Mm-hmm.
develop, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one saw that a DVD mail order organization was going to turn into a streaming platform
Right.
and call itself Netflix
Mm-hmm.
and completely annihilate every video blockbuster easy video shop out there.
Mm-hmm.
No one saw that.
And that was weak leadership, like I think piracy scared the labels.
Mm.
And in their fear, they turned to something they didn't understand, which was Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a result, screwed everybody.
Mm.
And then Spotify came and that was just like the nail in the coffin for, music sales.
Mm.
Well, what I will say has been an interesting sort of observation on our end is that film and music got hit real hard with digitization and streaming.
Mm.
Comics hasn't.
Yes. It's one of the outliers.
It's a really interesting outlier because, with music, obviously vinyl's made a comeback, but because the means of people consuming music has expanded into streaming, so they go, the average person will still turn to that, and then maybe they'll collect the vinyl. With comics, it's kind of one or the other. It's like, how do you read comics, either physical or digital? And there's still a lot of people who value that tangible nature, something collectible, something you can hold.
Exactly.
I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. We've sold probably 5 digital comics to date and in excess of 600 physicals in under 12 months. So it shows like what people value in the comic industry.
But it's also about this. And I know you don't like following trends. It's also this thing about collectibles.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
People like tangible things.
Yep.
Because they like to look at it. They like to touch and feel and, admire and, like a mate of mine, he's a chef, but he's also a sneakerhead,
Right.
right? Why? Because he loves buying shoes.
Yeah, we noticed the Jordans.
Yeah. You know, I'm not talking about me, but, you know, and then there's like people who are right into Lego.
I was a Lex Ego
Alex Ego.
Lex Ego addict.
Really?
Yeah, no, that
I had Kenny Lee on.
Kenny Lee.
Kenny Lee. He started
Oh,
up.
wait. Kenny, hold on. What?
Not Kenny G.
Not Kenny G.
Kenny Lee.
Do I know Kenny Lee?
Kenny Lee. He started up Light My Bricks.
Like My Bricks. No, I'm thinking of another one. I thought he was associated with I'm Rick James Bricks.
I mean, it could be, but yeah, I don't know.
But that's
But he's a Lego guy
Mm.
who started up an organization for LED lighting for Lego.
Smart.
He was the first one.
Oh,
when
wow.
when you buy Lego, you go to their website and it says, "Do you want to buy additional like lighting kit to
Mhm.
display?"
Good
And
man.
then it directs you to his website.
Very smart.
So smart,
That's
stupid smart,
that's the thing is that you've got
but
these-
lucky, very lucky. I think.
lucky, but also I think maybe, you know, it's that thing like Josh was saying about being able to sort of, I think being ahead of a trend is not something that you know, but something that you can sense. And that was one thing that because like I like to read comics, and I had this sort of my own personal experience has been when I first collected, I was like, oh yeah, I want to collect everything cool. I was like, oh, I like X-Men, I'll get some X-Men. I was like, oh, I like Spider-Man, I'll get some Spider-Man. But then the things that started resonating with me personally was the darker, grittier stuff. I even came across some issues of like Swamp Thing from the 90s, and I was like, well, this was different from it was ahead of its time, quite confronting. And I feel like it's interesting because people in the comics world talk about, they're like, oh, there's a comic renaissance. And I think that comics were sort of given new life with the MCU films, the DC films. People started, and they still do buy comics now because of that. But to me, a big sign of a shifting in the times was when the Boys TV series came out.
The Amazon TV series.
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
It was so good.
right.
Was being the key word.
I wasn't crazy about the latest season.
Yeah, the latest season wasn't that great, and Gen Z's not that great either. But like,
Well, the crazy thing about The Boys was that the comic series actually is not new at all. But the fact that it got adapted into a TV show and then people started, flocking to that. To me, I felt I felt it work in a similar sort of pattern with how I was feeling with the Marvel films. It's getting a bit fatigued. It's kind of the same thing. It's all colorful. It's
Mickey Mouse.
It's Mickey Mouse, right? There was all this sameness.
Actually, when you talked about sensing of trends, right? I definitely agree with that. I don't think it's completely unpredictable. There's a guy, I think his name's Ted Goya, and he gets hired by a lot of companies. He refers to himself as a futurist, and he says the world basically moves in 50-year cycles, sometimes a bit longer, sometimes a bit shorter. So things come around, and where I see us right now is very similar to where the 90s were. Where the 80s was a lot of that colorful, bubblegum, popcorny stuff across all mediums.
Yeah.
And in the 90s came with this dark, gritty thing, which suddenly was so refreshing. It was never going to last because it was almost, you can compare it in music with glam rock and grunge. And grunge was just so depressing that, well, who's left alive?
Yeah.
It was almost too pure in its antithesis of the 80s.
I mean, it's interesting when you think about the character that actually saved the MCU, which was Blade. Like that first scene in the very first Blade movie, is so iconic and so dark. It like shocked everybody.
Many people didn't even know it was a Marvel film.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, with the latest Deadpool, Wolverine, like Wesley Snipes is the longest standing action hero, anti-action hero, 40 plus years.
Right.
But I think what happens is if something dark comes out, then direction changes for it to then be customized to be appealed by the masses to, obviously maximize profit, It happened with Star Wars as well, right? And Disney has Star Wars now.
The problem I find with, when, for example, like Star Wars started trying to capitalize on stuff and like the MCU was that these big studios were always chasing the trend. And I see that happen on a smaller scale as well. You've got independent creators who maybe they created their work back in like the 80s or like the early 90s and it was of its time. And then as time went on, they tried to readapt it to fit the changing climate. I was going to say climax. The thing is, I think there has to be a genuine fit because audiences, although there are a lot of, for lack of a better word, dumb audiences who just kind of like, hey, trend here, trend there. But audiences, I think, for them.
That well.
Thank you. I've been practicing.
He's one of them.
This is just
Let's go.
Let's go. This is my persona. But I think that people, for the most part, are smart enough to detect when they're being sort of pandered to. I think if you are, moving into a dark trend, genuinely dark things will do better than people who then try to adopt darkness, and vice versa too.
Have you guys seen the June movies?
No.
So when the first June movie came out, it was like, how could you top this? And then the second June movie came out. I was like, oh my God, it's even better than the first one. And there was a lot of talk about this is actually how Star Wars should have been.
Wait, June?
June. D-U-N-E.
Oh, I was just like June, like as in before July? Right. No, I hadn't
June
seen
movies, yeah.
Yeah.
So because of the story, and it's the exact same storyline. The storyline doesn't change, but it's how they do it and the cinematography and the sequencing and these grand, like scenes and all that type of stuff. And even though it's set in the future on a different planet, you cannot see any signs of actual computers or technology because it's all about the characters. It's all about this, the story and the love and the compassion and the struggle and,
I think that's what it's always been about. If you go back to the original Star Wars, like A New Hope, like George Lucas said, he intended it for, it's basically a Western.
Yeah.
With a sci-fi sort of cloak.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting when I talk, because Josh is not a Star Wars fan. Yet when we have this discussion about, especially like, what's happened in modern day Star Wars, I can't remember what our latest case.
Oh, it was on how would I have brought Star Wars back?
Yeah, like these questions come up and I'm so curious to pick his brain on it because I'm like, as somebody who completely has no emotional attachment to Star Wars, I said, how would you fix Star Wars? And what do you recall?
I don't recall what I said, but...
That was the perfect setup, and you just dropped the ball on that.
I mean,
I say a lot of
it's
shit.
a perfect answer. I don't recall.
I don't. He doesn't care, but he does. That's the thing. He didn't care enough about it.
It made him tear up as a Star Wars fan. So
it was interesting that sometimes looking at it objectively, you are able to make it work financially. The outcome of it, whilst still having that emotional appeal. And that's something that we've taken forward into what we do.
Well, actually, what you said about being objective, that brings me to another one of my philosophies.
Controversial philosophies.
Hang on. I want to answer the question on how I think they should reinvigorate Star Wars. They need to just hire Jon Favreau and get him to create a series of movies based on the way that he did Mandalorian. because the Mandalorian, I think, saved a lot of the older Star Wars generation fans because it had that kind of wit to it and that like logical.
I see. I don't know. Like I can't agree or disagree with that because
Are both of you lawyers?
No.
nah. I studied law for 1 year and then dropped out because
It's just the shades of gray.
It's,
That's what it is.
50 of them.
No. That's rubbish.
I actually remember now what his suggestion was.
What was it?
It was because I said, "Oh, are you gonna negate the sequel trilogy 7, 8, 9?" And he said, "No, we'll let that for as a whether it's a dark spot in the series of films." But he said, "You pay whatever sum is required to hire George Lucas back, and then that's all I could." No, what was it? I don't want to butcher it because there was something involving having.
It's about the Jedi ghost.
It was about like being able to give Mark Hamill his proper send off for one, and Harrison Ford.
Hang on. So they did a send off for Harrison Ford.
I didn't like it.
And they did a send off.
I didn't.
Yeah, not a
like it.
respectable one.
No, not a respectable one. Like to be like axed off by your goddamn son.
Yeah, I just thought. No, I mean, look, I didn't feel. I thought the Harrison Ford one was fine. I didn't like the Mark Hamill send off. That really rubbed me the wrong way.
It was along the lines of having Luke and Vader come back.
That's it.
And Vader would, in the end, sacrifice himself for Luke, and the price of that was that he would not get to become a Jedi ghost. Like he's gone.
He's gone.
So that the father and son finally had the
Oh
reconciliation.
no, I remember. That's it. Here we go. It's all coming back to me now.
Oh.
Exclusive.
This is how to fix Star Wars. The thing that they didn't do in 7, 8, 9, which everybody was hypothesizing they should have done. The big bad of, what was that, 10, 11, 12, is Darth Plagueis, the master of Sidious. And Darth Plagueis' power was, some say he could bring people back from the dead. So this time we do away with a CGI droid army or stormtroopers or whatever. He brings back dead Jedi and dead Sith. And that's his army. So in this time period, they go like, all right. And obviously, so you've got Finn, Poe, and Rey from the sequel trilogy. We keep them. But Rey has, especially after her time with Luke, she's been learning a bit about both sides of the Force, a bit of dark side, because she's kind of come to terms with her. Was
Her
it
background.
Palpatine's her granddaddy?
Yeah.
So fine, whatever. We'll move forward with that.
I mean, you got daddy issues, but now you got granddaddy issues.
Dark side granddaddy issues. So yeah, I think his suggestion was so she basically has been practicing those sides. So they kind of look at this again, shades of gray, fighting fire with fire. Where if he's got people to resurrect, then they'll have to work to try and maybe on a smaller scale resurrect their own people. So having Luke and Darth Vader get resurrected on the side of good, but like physically, no Force ghost. But then after the fact, in order for, Vader and Luke both have the opportunity to take down Plagueis, but whoever takes him down severs their connection from the Jedi Ghost Force world. And Luke's ready to do it, but Vader stops him so that his son can still live on, sacrifices himself, and you can have Mark Hamill give this emotional performance in that moment. And when Josh said that, I damn near started crying because it was like Vader gets that second redemption. Because, Vader pops up as the Force Ghost at the end of 6.
Yeah.
And they never bring him back after that.
Yeah.
And I was like, you give us a villain who is intimidating, who brings an army that we haven't seen before. And that thing too of having characters have to fight their old, these Jedi masters. Bring back Sam Jackson with the purple lightsaber. Bring back Darth Maul. You get that member berries, like South Park said, that nostalgia fix. But in a way that feels appropriate to the story, because Plagueis could bring people back from the dead.
I feel like The Simpsons need to do an episode like this, and then it'll actually happen.
And then it'll happen. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, unless of course George Lucas is watching this and want to hire these guys to create the script. exclusive.
Hire him as the writer and hire me as the translator. Yeah, because I think my strongest skill working with him, and this is one of my favorite things to describe, is our working relationship.
Is he going to write it in Chinese and you have to translate it to English?
I translated to
can't write in
Japanese.
Chinese.
No, well, he has all these ideas. He's an ideas man, but Josh is like a hot geyser, just in a naturally occurring source of steam.
Let's go!
Let's go to the geyser. It's just steam and heat coming out of the ground, and everybody just sees it and goes like, "Oh, it's a bit dangerous, mate." But I see it and I go, "That's energy we could tap into," and nobody else can do it but me. So I put on my whatever exosuit and I get up in there. And the thing is, you're going to get burnt. It's not going to be easy, but I feel like I'm the only one who, because of this synergy we've built up, has the ability to work with the geyser and then extract that energy. And then so like we turn into a script. So how we did it with the music films and then now with the comic book. Yeah, which I like to think people go like, oh, don't you think that paints Josh in a negative light? And I'm like, well, it's both.
I don't think it's a negative light. It's a light of untapped potential that you can help navigate and create.
Because I mean, when it comes to music, he's got no problem.
I thought you were going to say something else then.
What?
Like, when it comes to music, he's got lots of problems.
He's got lots. I mean, there's always other problems, but I just feel it works well. That I think somebody once described they said, is it pretty much like you guys trying to write ideas? Is it like Josh pacing back and forth in the room saying ideas and me just like frantically typing away?
That's the image that goes through people's minds, I think.
And when they said that, I was like, that's bang on. Yeah. Yeah.
So when you created the comic, what was the creative process that you went through? Did you because I think you said that it's like over 10 years, like you've been.
Well, we've got two comics. One's Gods Among Men and the other one's Anna. And the process is very different for both of them. Gods Among Men, the story is already there. I just have to, tell it to Aaron and get the points across to our artists, and then we work out on how do we best represent this and stick true to the story. So in that one, it's more like the story tells us what to do. That's not so much that we have to be creative in that sense in terms of the creation. We get creative in the marketing and how to do the sales of it.
And in the conversion from the story into actual page panels and framing and scenes and everything.
And I think there's always a balance. The thing is, people think balance is 50-50. I think that the ratio is more like on a sliding scale. It depends. And as a creative, the balance is between how business focused you are and how much of an artist you are. Like I refer to it like the artist and the king. Because you have very different priorities or responsibilities to the people that below you. And my approach, I think, roughly for both titles, like overall, I'll say like it's 70% you think like a king and 30% as an artist. And that 30% is very important. I think a lot of studio executives are all king. They do not have any respect for the art, like Star Wars is a great example. That's an example of just thinking about trends and money and not caring about canon or the fandom. And that's not good.
Yeah. And thinking about how they can maximize profits, right? How they can tap into the younger generation with all like figurines or the toys or whatever, because that then builds a greater client base.
But it's a very short-lived, and I think in the same way that big corporations do it, and when you see people who try and adopt a new approach to their property in a disingenuous way, it doesn't last. You might get one or two who jump on, but you don't have sustainability that can transcend the trends.
Like the Chinese real estate market.
Oh, shit. what is wrong with the Chinese real estate market?
Well, you see it in their approach to movies too.
Hang on. What's wrong with the Chinese real estate?
Let's go. Here we go.
Oh, I think it's just it's kind of like a great example of a make a quick buck with short-sightedness.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
The fact that they can do a skyscraper within a day.
yeah, things like that, or building things without thinking of having a market is actually going to buy it. So like temporarily.
Oh, yeah,
looks
like
good.
in Docklands.
Yes, another example.
Bro.
Good job, John. So
That wind tunnel there,
Yep.
they need to like put a turbine in there and actually
it's
make
so
some
funny,
money
like,
out of it.
People look at short-term success sometimes, and then they start to follow it because they think, oh, look, they made this, they must know what they're doing. And it happens to the best and the biggest. I mean, look at what happened with Facebook's Meta thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you look at Zuckerberg and go like, this man can do no wrong, and he made something nobody wanted. And that's where,
And then they're still trying to screw us
right,
by
for his mistake.
listening in on all of our phones.
That's where I think you need to have that balance. Like, art is definitely important. I think creativity is what really separates us from monkeys. And it kind of tells us where to go next. But if you fully embrace that with no regard for the business, then you're not going to be able to. So that's why I think for me, it's like 70-30. Because the business first, if you can't create a cash flow from it, you're not going to be able to do it for a long term.
He's very business minded.
Oh yeah. And I learned a lot of that from him because it's funny how
It's funny how that's like a dirty thing to say as a creative, which I don't understand that.
But then they'll say things as well like it's really tough to make money in this economy, and you're like, well, you obviously care about it.
There's so many people they post musicians, they post up these stuff like art is not a competition, music is not a competition. And I went in there. So sometimes I can't help myself. I have to.
just a pot stir.
It's like
Fucking hell.
it's like
Do you-
Ricky
have,
Gervais.
Do you have a like a logo as your profile photo as you're like trolling?
No, it's my Peter Coulson photo right there. Like,
Let him know.
I just went.
I actually respect that. I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect the fact that you stand up to putting your actual photo on there when you're replying to something.
He subscribes to that theory of anything that you're willing to say online, you should be willing to say to a person to their face.
Yeah.
Like the Mike Tyson thing. He said, what was it? The reason why people can...
He said social media's made a lot of people be willing to say stuff because there's no risk of getting punched in the face. There's actually a quick side story. We couldn't tell it before, but this is related to Anna.
It's a good story.
We put an Instagram post up, and Anna was like, "Hey, I need to give this reel a caption. Like, give me something like inflammatory." And I went, "Done. The world has a new metal queen." And boy, did that!
Oh,
Look, 80% of the comments were like, "Yes, girl," and then there was 20% who were like, "You think that shaking your ass makes you metal? Rah 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 rah." And yeah, and then there was this one chick who's a photographer from Berlin, came in. She's a gig photographer, but she I think also sings. And she just came in like off the bat nasty, like, "You sound like you're a dying cow or something, blah blah blah." And we jumped in and started going like, replying to her. And she was like, basically accusing me, saying you can't be objective because you're the boyfriend of the singer. And in the end, I think
I made a suggestion to Anna.
Yeah,
I said, you should comment this.
throw down. So Anna wrote, "We're going to be in Berlin on this date. We can put your name on the door and make time for you in the set. Come on stage and show us what you got." And after that, it was silence.
No reply. Because so many people, and that was one thing that when we, first came into the scene, especially with things like comics, like to be really objective, the average comic creator are generally very introverted. Even I myself, naturally, I'm very introverted. Surprise, surprise. And I think when we came into the scene, we were like, we want to bring rock star charisma to an industry that's very introverted because that's kind of it's a bit of who we are, but also we're like, let's amp it up because if nobody's doing it, you're gonna be doing it best. But that was a great. I love that interaction because it was a great example of everybody is so willing to run their mouth until somebody issues a challenge.
I kind of miss that in entertainment.
WWE baby.
Yeah, look,
John Cena.
oh, I mean, Attitude Era.
Yeah.
That's, I miss a lot of that. Even one of my favorite band of all time is Oasis. And I know people can't stand them, but as a kid, I was like, wow, that is so cool what he just said. That is so inappropriate. And the two of them, like, they've never backed down. Even when they're still the same today.
I think it's because we've moved into an era where we're just too conscious of being politically correct and public like backlash and things like that.
My biggest problem with that is that everyone is still the same amount of nasty. It's just that now the nastiness is hidden. I prefer it when it's like it's.
Is it hidden?
I think more.
I think
Online,
the ownership is hidden.
Yes,
right.
The ownership is hidden.
Well, that's the thing. Like you said, online it's no, but in public, yes. And that is this sort of discord between what is and what is perceived. And to me, it's like it's like one term we hear a lot in comics, but also in music, is this word community. And there's a lot of people who throw the word community out. And look, in theory, I think community is great. But
Hang on, what's wrong with the word community?
No, what's wrong is the application to me.
The application? What's wrong with the application?
Okay, there's a lot of people I find who go like, we are a community. We are a community who supports each other. And, all we want is the best for each other.
I think it's more like competitive sport. You see, like...
I mean, that's how it actually is.
I grew up like watching English Premier League, right? And you've got rivalries like Manchester, Liverpool. Now, the thing is, you can still play the game and be sportsmanlike.
Shit, hang on. My camera's just stopped.
Yep.
Oh,
It's the problem of being a one-man job.
it's
okay.
tricky. Also, and do you mind if I grab a Red Bull for myself?
Can I have another one too?
Wow, another one.
It's okay.
Thank you.
I got a mother.
Next time we'll come, we'll prepare.
Yeah, we'll
We'll bring for you the new pack. of Red Bull.
We're not used to talking for so long. I'll bring my own next time.
It's very exciting.
It is very exciting. Hey, you finish your segment. You can't attack me. You go on a fight and bully.
I
I don't see if I don't mean it.
That's-
I'm
yeah.
from the village.
Yeah.
in the village, yeah.
Talking, then okay, let's talk.
Yeah, that's the thing. You should be able to back up your words.
Exactly.
I'll write at the pinnacle point too when you're like, wait, what's wrong with community? Right, I'll get you to reissue that.
Oh yeah, what was the question?
What's wrong? What was it? What's wrong with community?
Yeah, what's
Or the idea of community.
What's
What's
wrong
wrong?
with the idea of community?
I think that it's inherently it's like an idealistic goal, because I think there's a lot of people who will say, we're here trying to support each other, but in their heart of hearts, they know that that it's a competition.
And that's why I likened it to like competitive sport, right? Like in soccer. And you see, Man United and Liverpool are rivals. You can still meet each other on the pitch and be sportsmanlike. I'm not saying like purposely try to break that guy's leg. Although, in business that might also be acceptable. But you can still be sportsmanlike, you still play the game, but you are in competition. And somehow competition's become a dirty word. And people try to pretend it doesn't exist. So when you hear statements like music's not a competition, and I actually replied to a comment, I said, no, music's not a competition, but the music business is. So if you want to be part of the business, you're going to have to accept that. Otherwise, you're just a hobbyist, unfortunately.
I think also there's this piece around if you are doing creative things without any connection to like trends or anything, you're seen as this like pioneer that people like look up to, and you know, you're doing something outside of the herd, and when you do something outside of the herd, that creates fear within the herd, and then people are like, "Oh, you can't do that," or you're, you know, I don't like this or I don't like that, and it's kind of like, yeah, but why?
We're very used to that.
Yeah, I mean, I get why, because people are also scared of change, right? Like people talk. It's really funny because I don't know. This is a weird segue.
People were scared of Elvis.
Right, exactly. Massive change.
They were scared at the way that people were dancing to Elvis songs. Fuck me.
The devil in them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. I had this really weird segue, but it was about disruptors. And I remember I was at Monash Uni and they had these posters up that said, "Do you see yourself as a disruptor?" And the first thought that came to my mind was the irony of learning how to be a disruptor in an institution. It didn't make sense to me. But, you know, I think people fear it. And that's, look, for lack of a better way, because they're sort of, if they get intimidated by it, I kind of see that as, oh, okay, then we're kind of doing something right. Because like what Josh mentioned before about, I don't know if it was this podcast or the podcast the other day, but it was, if everybody's doing it, then it's probably wrong. So if you're able to sort of situate yourself in a place that is outside of the convention, then, you know, I mean, well, one way we literally situated ourselves outside of a convention was we sold comic books at gigs as band merchandise. And now we're going to take this to, oh, you guys didn't talk about this, but in November, we're going to Queensland for the Airlie Beach Music Festival because Anna's going to be performing there. And it will be the first metal band to perform at that festival, and we'll be the first comics to table at that festival.
That's great.
So it's good, I think, when you're on the path of first this, first that.
I think there needs to be more creatives that do stuff like that.
It's hard though. Yeah. He's coming to, you know, when we said Josh is the business mind, and he comes to me and he goes like, okay, like, so what are you doing that's new? Like, you know, because like, you know, we get our books in stores and all that. And I just blank. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. And he said, give me answers.
You hit a creative block.
Oh, and sometimes, you know, you never get a fist block, but it's like a mental.
No. Let me remind you, you crashed the drone in the cave.
Well, sometimes I'll come to him, you know, like Aaron's like, we're in 25 Australian stores. And I go, yeah, that was last week. What do you want, a cookie?
Wow.
Yeah. But it's
Holy shit.
It's that kind of egging on, right? That a lot of people go like, oh, like that's really negative. You're not grateful. But I'm like, no, but and maybe it's also my years of, call it Stockholm syndrome or whatever. But that motivates me because I get upset with myself when I go, okay, yeah, right. Last week I got us into this many stores. What am I doing this week? And if there's a lull, I'm like, why?
I think so I agree, but I think there's also an element of you understanding Josh's intent in that type of commentary, and he's not being malicious. He's not trying to be hurtful. It's this like healthy banter, you know, between you two. And so, if a person that you didn't have that with said something like that, you'd probably react a different way.
Well, it's funny because, you know, when I was, so Josh and I do the same job, working removals. And it's funny when, you know, like.
Shit, there's like a real fucking bromance here.
Well, it's a convenient bromance because I'm like,
it's a bromance out of convenience.
Yeah.
That's the worst kind of bromance.
It's a cost-efficient bromance.
Do you guys live together as well?
Yes, we do.
Holy
One
shit.
car. Yeah. That's it. I'm just glad. I was going to say, I'm glad we don't share a toilet, but sometimes I catch him going into my bathroom and I'm like, hey,
bro,
that's mine.
No, I won't say that.
Not at the same time. Oh, well.
the crossing of the fucking Jedi swords. Who's got the purple sword? The saber.
Mine's pink.
Damn.
Yeah. All right.
No, but uh, train of thought right out. No, what was I? It's about the working relationship.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting case because there was something you mentioned where you said Josh was of the business mind, and I had this thought where I said, "Oh, I'm kind of like of the no mind."
Yeah, you did say that.
Did I? Oh,
And then I brought up the crashing of the drone again.
oh yeah, and then boom, the mind just left.
Yeah.
But what was a really interesting thing about our history was that leading up to the age of 14, I'm the youngest in the family,
Right.
and I was always very sheltered. So from age like 0 to 14, I was on the trajectory to be like a spoiled, whiny, just achieve nothing.
I know very many people who
Yeah.
are sheltered and are exactly the same.
Yeah, I what was scary was I only learned this after I got out of it, and yeah, I was like super, you know, chubby, love chicken rice, and all that jazz.
Singapore chicken rice.
Singapore chicken rice, Hainanese chicken rice.
I make a
It
great
is.
one, by the way.
Do you?
Yeah, he taught me.
Are you inviting me over for chicken rice?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Was it Holland Village chicken rice?
No, it's Mayuna Court.
Yeah.
Vermont.
Well, no, his style of it actually is a fusion. He took the sort of Singaporean approach to the rice, and then you add a bit of what was it, the Hong Kong Malaysian twist to it?
The Hong Kong style with the sauces.
Hong Kong style with the sauce.
I can feel a cooking podcast coming along.
Oh, yeah. I can feel an eating podcast coming along. Woo!
Did she just say yummy?
Yeah.
I just think, well, that was the thing, right? He was the one who basically like pulled me from the muck of like laziness and being spoiled. And he took me he was like, look, he was setting up his restaurant at that time. And he basically was like, oh, you're coming with me. It wasn't like, why don't you come with me? He's like, you're coming with me. I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to work and, and being in food and responsibility. And it was since that point all throughout high school and then uni and everything beyond that I was shown the ways of life through this guy.
Food has this funny thing, like, and in other creatives, they make excuses for it, I feel. Like, Aaron used to go, like, do you want me to do it correctly or do you want me to do it fast? And I went, both. Like, it's not an either or. Like, you do it right and make sure it's out on time. And in food, you never get to question that. That's the standard. That's how it is. If you can't do it, get out of the kitchen. And that's what I love about food and cooking.
Well, it's like what you said in a food business, right? That these other creative industries don't have. You say in a food business, if your food is shit and people don't buy it, there's no, I'm going to go to the government for funding to bail me out.
Exactly.
There's no community like, hey, go to my friend's place because he makes like a mad curry. It's like, if it's good, people will buy it.
And if it's shit, they won't.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they'll
It's
tell
very
their
black
friends.
and white. Yeah.
It is. And, Josh was like, why are the creative fields getting any concessions if food isn't? It's not to say that there's like take away arts grants, but it's that thing, when people go like, hey, our friend's project isn't doing well.
The key word is you hear it a lot in artistic communities, like you need to support this band, support this creator. You don't hear that in food. You don't go like, hey, Aaron set up a chicken rice store. Go support him if you want him to keep making chicken rice. They're like, dude, if his chicken rice
We don't want him to keep making chicken rice.
tell him to make better rice. Stop burning the rice.
Yeah.
I when I studied electrical engineering, I worked in a Japanese kitchen.
Yeah.
And I washed rice for a whole year.
Right.
That was my job. And then I got moved on to tempura.
Wow, big
and
responsibility.
chicken. And then after 6 months, so after a year and a half, I was running the place.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Like you have to, whether you're working for yourself or with someone, you got to see what you're doing if it's working. And I think especially with creative industries where you can get so wrapped up in the artistic process, if you're not taking stock, like, okay, this action A that I'm doing, what is it yielding? And if it's not yielding a positive result, then like, why do you keep doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Well, thanks guys so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having
Thank you
us.
for having us.
How can people find your comics?
So we have an online store, which we got a nice, easy domain name, cynation-comics.square.site.
Fantastic.
Thinking about doing a jingle for that.
I'll have that come up.
Beautiful. But I think if that's the primary place.
Or follow Anna Band, come to any of the gigs, and you can grab our comics too.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to maybe next year getting you back on and seeing how the Europe tour went.
That'd be amazing.
And
Chicken rice.
and I'm waiting for the invite for the chicken rice night.
All right.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thanks everyone for listening in. Make sure you hit subscribe, that notification bell, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one. See ya.